Stories can provide encouragement or despair. Stories around this time of year can be of hope or of loss. Welcome to Revivers Podcast. These last few months have been really busy. Unfortunately, we're unable to get some guests come in to share their insight in the last few months. However, we're just gonna, time is unforgiving. We're gonna keep going. This month we are talking about stories. Remembering our story reminds me of when the podcast started. It was all about stories, those stories that people experienced. Today we're really going to talk about the stories now. How do they sit now, and also how does that make us see and how we approach today. I will be the one sharing my insight on this topic as we continue forward. I'm going to start with a quote from Franz Kafka from the book Metamorphosis. The Metamorphosis. It says, I cannot make you understand. I cannot make anyone understand what is happening inside me. I cannot even explain it to myself. It seems a lot of times, unfortunately, what I've seen, the barriers are more internal when it comes to understanding, like true understanding. And part of stories is to help us understand a little bit more. This month, I will be diving into this theme. I'll be diving into what it may mean to ask a question. Well, as we dive in, like, why continue when it feels pointless? A lot of times, during this time of year, it can be very triggering for those who are around. So I will be unpacking that this month's topic, Remember Our Stories. A disclaimer before we begin: if you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline available for those in the States. I do encourage you to find what is available wherever you are. On my website, I do have a few international crisis lifeline on one of the pages. I don't know how accurate they are, but I do encourage you to find what is available, whether it's a community center or a friend, a coworker. If you are overwhelmed, I encourage you to find and say, I need help. See if there is something that can get you more support. With that being said, I'm going to Carl Jung. He says it this way: you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. We are professional at times procrastinators. Unfortunately, the stories we like to see ourselves in can be a barrier if we feel it's unattainable, unreachable. So, but on top of that, it's not just the broad generalization of success. It's also the context around it. Context a lot of times is everything regarding a story. And side note, I thought this was interesting. I heard it in another podcast. I also read it. That one of the acting, I think it was an acting school. A lot of notable actors went through. A well-developed character in a story usually has these characteristics to be well-developed. Okay, so that was redundant, but to the point, what is my need? So if I'm writing a character for a compelling story, what is my need? Then the other question is, how would I want society to see me as? And then the last one is, what is my one tragic flaw? These three questions really, at least, shows me a lot of internal insight. A lot of, if someone is, maybe not in the movie, but maybe in real life, they are struggling. Some of the questions one may ask is, what do I need? What would I like my family, my friends to see me as? And what is my biggest barrier? I like also how Carl Jung says it this way: we are not what happened to us. We are what we wish to become. So, life is not static. Our stories are not static. The way I tell my story today is very drastically different than before. Not because it was different, but more I learned more. I understood more. I grew more. So in recovery, when I'm thinking about my story and healing, I found many incongruencies that weighed heavy on me. And that was part of the processing, the sifting through of some of the emotional baggage that a lot of us tend to carry. One of the questions I was going to asking myself today, what have you seen and experienced that caused the healing to delay? I would say the notion of being a good boy or good girl, or as you grow up, just being nice. These kind of notions, at least for me, sometimes weren't as helpful later on. So, some may know that I struggled with some mental health issues that just was fairly disruptive. At a very inconvenient time in my life. So, with that being said, some of the things that I've noticed is the over-explaining. Though in the beginning, it's always chaotic. You can kind of overemphasize whatever diagnosis you are diagnosed with, and then when that's happened, you try to contemplate and see how that fits in the new world or new vision of what your life may look like. And when things don't work out, or you over-explain, or things start to stagnate, maybe you're not able to work. Maybe you're not able to do or catch up with your friends who you went to university with. Maybe you just didn't want to be around your family anymore, just because it just is a reminder of where you're not. I feel that a combination of those were very unhelpful in my healing. I guess one question I always try to solve was, how can I have someone understand me better? And it felt like the understanding bit was going to actually make a difference to my current situation. However, most times it was not because of the listener. It was just because it's very unlikely someone really understand what you're experiencing, especially when it comes to something as ambiguous as mental health or any quote unquote invisible diseases can look like. So what other ways can I define, or I guess promote healing, is to just promote productivity? And I'll say this later. If I was more productive, I felt like maybe I'll be valued enough to be unwell. Like, let me just say it this way. We live in a culture that if you don't really work, you don't earn the time to rest. And when I was very ill, I was resting, but then I was never really feeling good that I was resting, and things felt very stagnant. So you could dig yourself in a little hole and kind of get stuck there. So that wasn't helpful. So I had to release myself from the idea of just being able to have people understand what I go through and being okay with it. As simple as that was one part. The other part, I think it takes time when you're healing, when you're going through trauma therapy, when you're going through all this, to feel like you could take on more. I kind of equate it to like having a bunch of groceries and they're all just awful. And maybe part of you knows that the idea that most people don't really care what's going on with you, but it's just too much to put in the grocery bag at that time because it'll just rip and tear. But we'll get to more of that later. Another question I have is, what helped to overcome these obstacles? One was time, but another thing is allowing time. So I wrestled with a lot of things. I've been hurt in a lot of ways. But it's, it uh, it wasn't just one thing, I would say. I think what, at least for me, helps me is to have some sort of structure, even especially when I was not doing very well. But also routine is helpful. And also help, putting yourself out there. I helped out a lot on some churches, and that was very helpful for me. Despite what how I feel now about certain things regarding the church, I do feel very fond about the idea that I had the avenue to kind of give back in that way. With that being said, I think it's off the top of my head. I think what helped me overcome was various things, being open to various things. And I think more I did, more I guess I pieced back what humanity I felt was shattered when I was really chronically not doing very well. So that's what helped. What helped also, 2020 hindsight, was just being having a reason to go the next day. I remember in the beginning I kind of said, story can also bring up the question, why continue when it feels pointless? I intentionally made a point of why I'm continuing. Being someone who attempted suicide in the past, that's something I always tried to do. What is done? And again, that goes back to context. What is context, especially in our stories, and how we know and feel what purpose is for us? I know for myself, I need to know why. Whatever it is, it could be something small, frivolous. It could be something that gets me there. Though I am doing much better today, but however, I'm never gonna, I can say, just take for granted. Just I look back and it's a humble reminder of where I was. So, with that being said, some updates. Really, not much. Like I said in the beginning, unfortunately, scheduling has been hard. It's been a little bit busier, it's been busier in one way, but harder to get people scheduled effectively. At the same time, I'm not going anywhere. I feel with the podcast, if it means that we will do not every Thursday, just because how busy things may feel, or just maybe it's just more increasingly hard to get more guests. Getting guests each week might be fairly difficult. We're still gonna try. Okay, so the idea is that hopefully we'll at least get one episode with me, hopefully more episodes with other guests. But as we press on, as we learn, as we grow, we kind of see if there's other avenues. Obviously, I'm still doing Music Monday, and also just trying to find out other ideas. If you have an idea, or you just want to be a part or be a guest, it's info@reviveministryfl.com. You can just reach out to us. I'd love to hear from you. I don't normally go and share any Bible verses, just because I don't want to hint at being proselytizing in any sorts. However, this kind of helps me flesh out my story a little bit more about what I mean to find purpose, what I mean by answering a question. If I feel it's pointless, how do I get to that why? This is from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10. I used to do 9 and 10, but I think 10 really kind of just focuses on what my main point is. It says, "This is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insult, in hardship, in persecution, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Now, I would say this idea is probably the idea that when I'm weak, I am strong feels like a thing the world would disagree on, especially today. But despite all that, I feel there's much wisdom, whether you're faith-based or not. No matter if you are like, whether I guess for me, I'll say it this way. It's gonna be underneath. I put it in a little box down here. I found that when I'm recovering, when I'm healing, when I was going through the thick of it, it worsened more when I strayed. When I got so upset that today wasn't as good as yesterday. When I got so upset that my symptoms are not doing as well. When I got so upset to go to my mental health provider and say the medication is not working, and this is the fourth time. When I get so upset that I've been through so many years of trauma therapy, I'm asking myself, is it even working? When I get so upset, what I've found that strain made me feel worse. I can only speak for myself. My weakness was belittled. My confidence derived at first of being productive, like I said, but later I just wanted to be less annoying and burdensome to those around me. That's where purpose, that's where my story, I felt that's where stories matter. It's not that I was wrong to be frustrated, wrong to feel like I wish things were different. It was just I was not, in essence, am I allowed to get better? I said this prior, but I say this even when I'm working in the mental health field, a lot of times working with clients. I ask, are you allowed to get better? And I'll say for the longest time, as we kind of I talked about what helped overcome obstacles. When I was able to say, I'm allowed to get better, I actually believe it. It's kind of strange how much stigma can come internally with some of these things. I just wanted to be invisible for a long time. What held me together? I didn't want to see. How can I say? I didn't want to see, or I couldn't lie to myself. I knew people would really struggle if I were to end my life or just give up. I could lie to myself that they get over with. I knew they cared about me. Now, one thing also that I learned was mental health is messy. And people are just trying. I look back at some of the things that were really hard to kind of swallow, but I was also really struggling. And those times, we always remember, at least for me, I always remember the worst times when I struggled and maybe something or just felt so isolating, felt so vulnerable, felt so empty. So that is, when I think about this verse in the Bible, I really, it just was so opposite what everyone was telling me. There were so many people, what are we going to do with Robert? What's going to happen with Robert? What do we need to do? I was filled with fear. And I felt weak. So this was encouraging at the time. It still is. I still like this. I think there's wisdom that whether you're faith-based or non, you can learn from. I never felt better when I strained to be better, when I felt I need to be better today, because not every day is going to be better. Franz Kafka says it, I was ashamed of myself when I realized life was a costume party I attended with my real face. I could feel that I felt that way. But in my experience, I'm not speaking for Franz Kafka, but from my experience, there's also times when people cared about me. There's always, as much as we could emphasize the bad, we could always emphasize also the good. Yes, I did feel this way several times. People didn't know what to say to me, but how would they? Like I said in the beginning, it's impossible for me when I let go of the fact that no one will really truly understand what I'm going through. It actually was pretty freeing. All that pressure to kind of linguistically explain what my symptoms felt like, how and why it wasn't improving, it felt lighter. Question comes here. It says, what changed in your story that helped you be able to tell your story today? Well, I've been telling my story, but to tell it the way I have, I've been very privileged to be working in the field I am. I get to not only help others, but it has been a reflective healing thing for me. But on top of that, I've embraced the fact that I will just have to live differently. So if I start to feel I have a bad day, I don't contact someone who doesn't know my context and get unsolicited advice and fall to the T and then blame the world because this is not right. No, because the fact of the matter is I'm playing on a boat that I don't sail on. I'm not being honest of where my context is. I have to live differently. I'll constantly have to adjust. I have to find ways to get ahead of my stress. It's kind of, I don't say, some things I just don't take for granted. And granted, other people will say, oh, that's a little bit too much. Well, it's just enough for me. And I had to realize that quickly, that if I had to do certain breathing techniques, progressive relaxation techniques before, if I do video upon video editing for my gaming channel and for this, and people are like, when do you have time? I'm like, this is my rest. This is what helps. This is what I learned. Now, other parts are just still healing. I could say, at least for me, I could know something's wrong, or I could know something's not true, let's say, and still feel like I'm not that well. Like that, still feel the negative per se. So a negative thought comes in. I have compounding evidence that that's not true. I still feel sometimes that even with no evidence that that's true. And that's not all the time. And yes, I am improving. However, the healing can be frustrating, can be slow at times, but I feel doing better. Not Tom Sawyer. Mark Twain says it this way: keep away from people who try to belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that, but the really great make you feel that you too can become great. In a time that we don't communicate well, I tend to spend less time with people who, I ask myself a simple question: if something really went well for me, who would actually be happy for me? And that shrinks my circles very small. Not to say people are bad, but we are very singular focused, and Um, I feel that I am just cautious. I'm so kind, but less is sometimes more. So, when it comes to my groups of people, like people who complain, it's not that I have anything against, maybe, and they may have justification. I just can't stay there because I know my context, because I know my story. I know that I have to be extra vigilant to stay away from that because it will impact me. And also, for me, like I said, routine, all that stuff really, really does help. Final thoughts? Well, thoughts is when we're telling our story, we have to also remember ourselves, our context, but also, as much as we may understand or even be kind of those situations that has happened to us, those things that have happened to us also extend to today. So that sometimes, let me just say it this way. Human beings have amazing ability to adapt. But sometimes that adapting is not always good. We could adapt to things that are not good. And sometimes things that are not good, things that are familiar, feel safer. What's bad seems safe. So everyone's situation is different. Everyone's context is different. So I would just encourage you, whatever you get from this episode, I just encourage you to take time. Take a little bit more time for you. Be kinder to you. Understand you. And you know what may trigger you, what may be coming up, be stressful. I just encourage you to try to get ahead of it if you can. Try to find or build systems that will work. Don't look for advice from people who haven't experienced something similar. Don't expect people to understand what you experience. Be around people that encourage you, but still can be, and don't require to know what you've gone through. They can be supportive, either or. Again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being watching and listening throughout the years. Revive Ministries is going to continue going. Adjustments, like anything else, may happen. I'll keep you guys apprised. If you want to be guests or want to be a part in a different way, please let me know. Remember to stay updated with ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. Our YouTube is the handle is Revive Ministry FL Podcast. This is our last quote for today. It's from Carl Jung. It says, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you.